What if the problem with work today isn't your job, your company, or your productivity system, but something deeper? Welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem, a podcast where we confront the deeper questions beneath our personal struggles and collective crises. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong. I am not a theologian or a philosopher, or at least by training. I am a PhD exercise physiologist with an interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. In this episode, I'm joined by Steven Puri, a former EVP at DreamWorks, a VP at 20th Century Fox, a three-time tech CEO, and now founder of the Sukha, a global community with over 34,000 people exploring the intersection of productivity and well-being. Steven has spent over 2 decades leading remote teams across high-stakes, high-performance industries, and what he's discovered is that the real key to meaningful, sustainable work has less to do with systems or software and more to do with soul. If you've ever wondered why work feels so draining, even when it's successful, or how to lead without losing yourself in the process, this conversation might reframe everything. Steven, welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem. Your resume reads like a Hollywood tech hybrid dream. What's the story behind your shift from entertainment executive to spiritual productivity advocate?
It's an eclectic mix. I agree with you. For those playing at home, what the good doctor is talking about is I've been an executive at a couple motion picture studio lots, and I've also raised like $21 million of venture and had a few companies, some successful, some failures. So both on the tech and the entertainment side, I have some interesting little observations to share.
All right, well, let's begin with your observation of, this is the We Have a Spiritual Problem podcast, and you're on here to kind of talk about how your experience has led you to seeing that there's a spiritual problem in many of the different areas of our existence. But let's begin with, how do you define spiritual?
Well, you and I have spoken a little bit about this before, which is I think that spiritual sometimes is conflated with religious. And I think that there is a distinction there. I'll elaborate on what you and I have talked about before, just so we have it recorded here, which is there is a sense of the spiritual, which may be a connection to a larger idea than just our existence. And many religions and many cultures have tried to capture that in words and in pictures and in, learnings passed along orally and all this. So I think that this is my personal belief that many of us believe that there is something more than our existence, and we are all grasping at ways to capture what that is. And it might be slightly beyond our reach to sort of put it in a box, and that's probably appropriate. I think that sometimes religion tries to make it a little too pat and a little too much in a box, and I think humans are maybe not very good at administrating the idea of God, no matter how well intentioned. Like it's a pretty heady kind of thought, but hopefully we live by the ideals that represents, because there is a lot of commonality across cultures about religion gives us a clear set of guidelines how to relate to each other, to relate to ourselves, and usually rites and rituals that reinforce those beliefs. So I think that religion can be, when properly applied, very helpful, but I think I'm more a spiritual person than I would say an organized religious person. Fair?
Makes sense. Yeah, and okay. I appreciate that kind of definition and that perspective, because I think the reality is we're approaching 8 billion people in this world, right?
Wow.
And I think there's got to be about 8 billion different views of God.
Yes.
Because we've all had our own individual perspectives, our experiences, and none of them can fully encapsulate what I see as the spiritual. And
right, as you told me before this, you said that there's your way and then 7 million or 7 billion wrong ways. So
right.
Got it.
Yeah, it's like the definition of a cult is a church that you don't go to, right?
Right, yeah, very true. Yeah, I know. So you asked me about spiritual. Sorry, go on.
Okay, no, go ahead. You're still on the spiritual, so that's
well. So you had asked me about spiritual problems, and so I will tell you this. I think we're all on our own journeys. I like to say we're all starring in a movie called ourselves. So in my movie, you are a supporting character, in your movie, I'm a supporting character, right? And we're trying to figure out what is the path of our movie, what is the plot. So for me, a very important point that brings me, on your doorstep is there's definitely a moment when I was at News Corp, when I was at 20th Century Fox. There's like the movies I was working on that my boss, was the chairman of Fox Film and Entertainment, was most interested in making were the ones that were pretty hollow. They were just sequels and prequels and mashups and things like that. And those are the ones that were on my slate that got prioritized. And that is, I don't think, an inspiring way to work. I don't think it's a great use of life, but it is a business, and it's not called, show spirituality or show art or show friendship. It's called show business, right? So to his credit, he was optimizing on how do we make the most money by spending the least money. And, I'm sure continues to do that somewhere else. I think he got fired, but he moved on to another studio and does that sort of thing. So that for me was around the same time I took up yoga. And yoga for me was something that was a very interesting and surprising mix of the physical and spiritual every day. And I'd never had that. And I wasn't ready when I first encountered it. My old girlfriend, who's still a very good friend, she was the director of marketing for YogaWorks. And when we were together, like dating together, she gave me, a mat and a class card. And I was like, here, go try this, the 8, 10 classes, whatever it was on a little card. Back when there were cards and it wasn't all just digital apps, right? And I remember, getting my little, 8 or 12 little initials on the card. And after the last one was done, I didn't have that feeling of like, oh, tomorrow morning I have to go do that. Okay. And like about 2 years later, I was traveling with my father and some family friends through India. And there is a national park in the center of India, a very large park. I guess an analog in this country would be like Yellowstone or Yosemite, where like, you've been there when you were little with your parents, and maybe you go once more with like your fiance or something, like that kind of thing, right? And it's where the Royal Bengal Tiger Preserve is. So our family friends said, oh, Steven's never been, to this part of India. We should go. So we went. And the first day we arrived there, everyone sort of went to these luxury tents scattered through the forest, right? So where you stay. There wasn't really a hotel. It was just like these yurts. And I happened to wander down a path. And about 30 meters off the path, there was a little clearing. And I saw a guy just standing there alone in a little white dhoti, little Indian guy. And I was like, I had nowhere to be until lunch. So I went up to him. And I was like, hi, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I lead a yoga practice. Now, this was somewhat amusing to me because he's standing alone in the middle of the forest. So I was like, okay, for whom? He's like, anyone who comes by. I was like, when? He's like, this afternoon. Okay, so if I go to lunch with my dad and like a bunch of our friends and come back here after lunch, you're going to be teaching yoga? He said, yes. No sense of irony, nothing funny. He's just like, yes. And I was like, okay. So went to lunch. Told everyone, oh my God, I met this guy in the forest just standing there like part of nature. It was so weird. I'm thinking I'm doing this. We should all go do this. And of course, they've done stuff like this. They're like, oh, that's so cute, Steven. You should go. We're good. We're good. It's like when friends visit you in Los Angeles, they're like, we want to go to Disneyland. You're like, I've been. Like, it's really good. You should go. I'm not going to Disneyland with you tomorrow, right? And so I went. He was standing there. There was a tall German guy who had joined him who was standing in the clearing. Beautiful DSLR camera on the side of the clearing. And I walked up and he said, let us begin. And he taught a yoga class in the middle of the afternoon in this forest in India. And after that, I really wanted to call Allie and just be like, I didn't understand, 2 years ago, what was the gift you were trying to give me? Maybe I wasn't ready, or something didn't click. But the clarity I felt was unlike other clarity I'd had in my life. And it became a daily yoga practice for over 10 years now. So wow. That I think was very influential for me in being like, okay, I need to do something that's a little more aligned with, what I want to contribute to the world in my own little way. I'm not going to be president of the United States. I'm not going to be a billionaire, right? But maybe I can contribute one pebble to, the lake. And this is my pebble.
So was that your moment when you realized that we don't just have a work problem, we have a spiritual problem?
I think around the Fox time is when I became more sensitive to how we energetically like contribute to the world. And it was also around the rise of social media being like not just Facebook, but being, a thing with Musical.ly, which became, TikToks or emergent TikTok and Instagram and Snap blowing up and all this. And I viewed it as like an incredibly pervasive, evil, greedy thing, and that is something that I am happy to rail about. Give me 5 minutes, I'll tell you all my thoughts on it. Too many of them. But yeah, I think we have a spiritual problem that's probably around the greed of wanting to steal people's attention the way it's like money.
Yeah, it's a sense. I mean, and here I am on a podcast. We are in a digital age where we can just interject ourselves into people's lives. But years ago, if I wanted to have a program like this, I'd have to somehow get picked up by a network or something like that. Even maybe 20 years ago, it was a local cable station or something like that. Wayne's World. But we are much more self-centered. It's much more look at me rather than what are we contributing in what we are doing. And that's not to say that everybody on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or everything doesn't have less selfish motives, but we are much more like that. We are out to just kind of, how many clicks can I get? How many subscribers do I have on YouTube or Instagram or whatever? And do you feel like we've lost some of that sense of purpose in our lives?
I think there's a field called memetics, right? Which is that we learn about what we should want by looking at other people and what they want. And social media, the algorithms in particular, and the fingers that they've put on the scale of the algorithm have definitely pointed us towards, well, I should want to be a Kardashian. I should want to be this kind of body, this kind of, lips. I mean, the girls now have plastic surgery in order to look like what the filter looks like on Snap or Instagram is astounding. You know what I mean? And all of the, Juvederm and the Botox and the Restylane and the fillers and this and that to try to get to what someone who developed a filter working at Instagram said someone should look like. That's astounding. So I think it's beyond just what we want. It's that the mirror that we're looking into with social media is not a unbiased
That's profound.
It's really bad. We've had Laura, my wife, and I have had a number of friends who either do or have worked at the old Twitter, work at Instagram or Facebook now, have worked at TikTok. And the more you understand, like the real conversations happening inside about it. We have shareholders. Our responsibility is to maximize value to shareholders, to get away with as much as we can until we're regulated, until someone catches us. It's pretty stomach turning.
And what do you see as the solution to that?
Well, I'll tell you this. I am having, as you know, I'm having a son in November. Probably have a daughter in 2 years. And think a lot now about what is the world that we will pass off to them. Here you go. Here's the car. It has a couple dings in it, but it still runs, right? I hope that their generation learns the dangers and learns to look at social media the way my generation looks at my parents' relationship to cigarettes. Where, there was an era where tobacco companies got away with promoting fabulous movie stars smoking in every movie and paying, the studios to make sure their cigarettes were smoked in so many scenes. And it was glamorous and fun. And even sometimes promoting the health benefits of smoking, which is astounding to think about today, but is a thing. I sure hope that what we're going through now is like that era of awakening where people start to go, wow, it sure was fun to smoke a lot, but I lost 3 friends to lung cancer and I'm not feeling so well myself. Maybe this is not what Mark Zuckerberg or Evan or, this TikTok guys promote it as, when Facebook, do you remember they did that campaign? Facebook is like a chair. It is, I don't know, you can find it on YouTube if you Google Facebook chair. And they did this whole campaign. It was just like, Facebook is like a chair for just being in around other people. And, Facebook's about connecting grandmothers with their grandchildren's, photos from May Day. And then, you have friends who work there and they're like, hey, do you want to see the advertising materials that we give to beauty companies now, where we allow them to select targeted groups to advertise to? So, for example, one of the ways in which we allow them to select people to see their ads for beauty products is it a girl in her teenage years who just deleted a selfie? Is it a girl who just used the words on her own photo of ugly, fat, not attractive, blah, blah? Do you want to target them? I find that stomach turning. I find that so bad. But the thing is, you have to understand the DNA of some of these platforms. Like Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook came out of a product called Face Mash, which was, I can't get a date. I'm a misogynist. I'm an angry, involuntarily celibate, male in my teenage years. I'm going to put up a website where I stole photos of girls so we can mock them because I'm so angry I can't get a date. That's the genesis of Facebook. You can't wash your DNA later. So as much as, they try and whitewash it like, oh, it's about, connecting mothers and children. No, the algorithm is about maximizing shareholder value, finding things that people object to because they interact more when they object to something. It's, it's really dark. So to answer your question about how, this goes, I hope that the next generation looks at social media and they have an awakening where they're just like, man, this was like the tobacco of our youth.
Yeah, when you think of, the number of suicides and, just self-destruction that kids are going through because of social media, it's just, it is stomach turning. And the fact that we're just simply promoting it and, I always worry, how implicit am I in it all? It's like, what am I doing or not doing with my access to social media that is having a positive effect on the world?
Yeah.
And I remember at one point I used to be, haven't been the happiest since we moved to Oregon. We came from Michigan. I'm from Pittsburgh originally. It just kind of was this cascade of events that led us out here. And, it's a beautiful area. Work has not been as fulfilling as I've wanted it to be. And just opportunities to grow. And there were more excuses to just kind of allow myself to be a bit more miserable than happy. And I found myself on Facebook, using it as a platform to complain. My negativity was coming out on it. It's like, this is wrong. This shouldn't be this way. And so I've tried to be much more intentional about putting positive messages out there. Yeah. And I tell some of my friends, it's like, the more positive my messages are on Facebook, probably the more I'm struggling with something. Because if I'm struggling, then I want other people to not be miserable themselves, but, try and recognize that those people are probably going through something as well.
That is a beautiful instinct, to be more positive than what we've just talked about with some of the pernicious evils of social media. You said the word intention and intentional, right?
Right.
And I have a very strong thesis that we all have something great inside us. And the question of this lifetime is, will you get it out or not? So you need to surround yourself with the people, the things, the ideas that enable that. And you need to be very selective about the things that, do not. So when we think about, on one hand, what we've talked about is the companies whose business model is steal your life, straight up. The more of your life they steal, the more they can sell to advertisers, the more money they make. That is their way of, doing business. So if you're going to scroll with your life, you're probably not going to write the next great American novel or film or create the next great company or cure cancer or develop cold fusion that's, reliable and affordable. You know what I mean? Like none of these things are possible when you're double tapping. Mm-hmm. And if you seek out, the way to get that thing inside you out, it really begins with intention. It begins with mindfulness. It begins with like, okay, you know what? Maybe this is not the easy path of lying on the sofa and scrolling, but it is something where at the end of the day, I'm going to feel proud. Okay, I did something with my life today. I moved forward. And I think that's ultimately, the best thing we can do. Because I think there's that Ernest Becker book about the denial of death, and to be very reductive. Won the Pulitzer Prize, but to be super reductive. He talks about everything is movement towards life or death, and inaction is just the slow slide into death. And it's weird because the one certainty for all of us is that we will die, right? There really isn't anything else that's that certain. Except for Brian Johnson, who believes he's going to beat it, or Peter Thiel, right? But barring
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, different podcast, right? But if you think about, okay, so this is the one certainty, then something that he puts forth is an idea of, in order to actually achieve something, you have to, in your brain, sort of like spiritually, like deny that you're going to die, because it can seem pointless. It can seem like, well, why do anything? I'm going to die anyway, right? And yet the people who do the things that eventually the things are immortal or their memories become immortal had to find a way to deny that in order to achieve something. So sometimes it's very hard to overcome that sense of why? Why should I do this? Life will end the same. But when you do, you actually find that the days that you do have are very different.
Well, I was thinking, you brought up how we're all in kind of a movie where we are the lead character.
You were the hero of Dr. Armstrong's theory, yeah.
Yeah. But, I think to a certain extent, to be spiritual, it's important for us to understand that in reality, we're really more of a supporting actor in a bigger picture. And I think that's a healthier approach that because if we look at, back to kind of my struggles with, the last, 17 years being here, mm-hmm. A lot of that has stemmed from me not seeing how my leading role was panning out, mm-hmm. and having to accept that I am in a more supportive role. Like one thing that I'll often say is, when we look at purpose, we often think, well, I'm here for a specific purpose. And that perfect purpose is usually centered around ourselves. Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to be accomplishing? And it still ebbs and flows for me. And there's days when I'm better at it and days when I'm much, much worse. But at some points I kind of looked at, well, I'm not really here for me per se. Because like you said, we're all going to die someday. And we're probably not going to leave the legacy that we think we're going to leave. But if we're having children, which you're on verge of having your first.
Here we go.
I have two. It's like, well, maybe my purpose in being here is not for me, but for my kids. That we had to move here for them to have the experiences and the relationships that are going to enable them to do what they need to do further down the line.
Where in Oregon are you?
I'm just outside of Portland in a town called Tualatin. So
Gotcha.
We technically kind of say Westland because Tualatin's in a weird area where it's actually in two counties.
Oh, okay.
And we're in the Clackamas County side. So the county border is in our backyard.
How did you choose that area?
Well, we came out to Oregon because I was teaching at Hope College in Michigan, and I was interviewing the following week. This was like beginning of January, so it's just before the semester started. I was interviewing at Grand Valley State University for a position, and I knew I had a really good chance of getting that position. My wife comes home early from work on a Friday. In fact, I'm standing in line to get lunch, and she calls me like 12:30 asking me if I wanted to join her at home for lunch. And I'm like, well, that's kind of last minute. You just decide that, you want to have lunch with. And so I said, well, I'm sitting here. I can order you lunch and bring it home to you. And as I'm driving home, I said, something's not right, because she normally doesn't do that. And so I get home and I could tell she was a little bit upset. And, we had a cleaning woman at the house at that point. And someone was kind of nosy. So she calls me into the garage, and I could tell she's, her eyes are welling up a little bit. And I'm like, what's the matter? And she said, well, I found out today that I'm probably going to be losing my job.
Oh, boy.
And she was in an executive position here in Southwest Michigan. Is not the place for women executives to be able to just bounce from job to job.
Got it. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so we need to decide what we're going to do, because if I get this job at Grand Valley, I'm not leaving after a year. She knew she'd have like a year severance. So what do we want to do? My son was 3. She was pregnant with my daughter. It's like, what do we want for them? We made a list of really what we wanted, and we narrowed it down. She had always wanted to live in Oregon. She has a friend whose ex-husband was actually from Portland, and she kind of always dreamt of kind of moving to Portland. And in fact, when she moved from DC area to Michigan, is how we kind of met. That's a whole nother story that could draw this podcast out forever. But
episode 2,
she kind of looked at it as like, well, okay, if I move to Michigan, it's kind of just one step closer to the West Coast. So, and she had, that was kind of what she wanted to do. We decided Washington, and we'd already been out to Washington looking at possibly, buying land out there to retire at. So Washington, Oregon, and then Vermont and New Hampshire. I'm not quite sure why Vermont, New Hampshire.
Okay, got it.
Except for the outdoors and
the Bahamas is not on that list.
No, none of that. So I go online, and the job I have at Western Oregon University was posted, and so I applied for it that day. The following week, there was a position posted for Willamette University, which is just it's in Salem, so it's a little closer to where we're living right now than where I work, but it was private school. So I applied to that one, and I got a phone interview for that one, got a in-person interview for the Western job. And so we decided we're going to Oregon. And whether or not I got that job or not, we had made the decision to go to Oregon. And if I didn't get the job, we were just going to come out and I was going to start a sports performance training business and go from there. And so I actually turned down the Grand Valley job before I heard from Western. And,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we came out here, and I came out really feeling like there was a distinct purpose. We were being called out here. Yep. And then when things kind of, went south a little bit, there was a little bit of friction. Oregon I'm a West Coaster, so the East Coast, West Coast mentalities are very different. And
how so? Can you elaborate on that? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've born on the East Coast, lived mainly on the West Coast.
I see in like Oregon, and I'm not knocking Oregonians. I mean, there's some wonderful people out here, but there's a certain level of passive aggressiveness in the people there.
As opposed to aggressive back east.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Back east, if somebody disagreed with you, they were going to tell you, and they were going to be blunt about it, and you just accepted that, okay, they just don't agree with me. Yeah. And you can actually argue like crazy with somebody and go have a beer with them, or be having a beer with them and be arguing. And here, if you say anything that is kind of remotely counter to what is the norm here, you're basically saying that you're putting down the status quo, you're putting down the people that you're talking about and all that. And it's like, no, just because I disagree doesn't mean you're wrong, you're bad, or any of that kind of stuff. It's just I see room for improvement. And so, I saw, every institution that I've come at, I've been able to come in and be able to initiate some change and growth and that kind of stuff. And I come out here, any ideas I would have would be, you think our students are stupid, or you think, our program is bad and all that. And it's like, no, it's quite the opposite. I think, our students have far more potential than we're realizing for them. So we can make these changes to grow things more. And so there's a lot with that. And, that's just kind of one example. you oftentimes will have conversations with people, and you can tell, they don't really want to be in this conversation. And so,
You're having an interesting time out there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's in kind of a nutshell how it's like. And again, it's anybody listening from Oregon,
love you all.
Love you,
Right, exactly.
It's just, we can all behave a little differently. We just need to understand probably better that all of us come at problems a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And, if we really looked at it and said, okay, what's the common goal here? Mm-hmm. And, your perspective is a little different than mine, but we have a common goal. So how do we get at coming together to achieve that common goal?
That is a great way to think about it, which touches on what you said before of, maybe we are starring in our own little movie, but maybe there's a way of thinking about we're all supporting players in a larger movie. So,
and I'm a big Pierre. Yeah, I'm a Pierre Teilhard de Chardin fan. I don't know if you've ever read in his stuff like The Phenomenon Man. He's a French Jesuit priest who was a paleontologist, and my undergrad was actually in geology. Mm-hmm. How I got from geology to exercise physiology is a long story as well, but he preached or spoke of a kind of a spiritual evolution of the human species. One of his famous quotes is, we are not humans having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right. Okay.
And he believed that we were evolving toward what he called the omega point, and he would refer to things like the cosmic Christ, that again, we are evolving, so we've gone through this period of human kind of physical evolution. Mm-hmm. And now we're moving toward the more spiritual side. We've already, we've evolved.
Let us hope.
Consciousness. Yeah. And I wholly believe, this country's really dealing with a lot of crap right now. And there's so much division, there's so much friction. But as a geologist, I knew that, that friction that the Earth experiences is right before, you're in California, so earthquakes and things like that.
I know earthquakes. I'm in Texas now, but I know California well.
Yeah, so that release of friction, usually, it helps the Earth to evolve, to expand, and do what it's kind of supposed to be doing. Without friction, we wouldn't have the Grand Canyon. We wouldn't have
that is right.
many of these structures within the world. And so anytime there's been friction in the world, it's always opened us up to some growth, some level of spiritual growth. And so I really see that right now we're on the precipice of this magnificent human evolution. And it's going to come down to our decisions. We can either destroy ourselves as a species or we can evolve. And the optimistic side of me sees that opportunity to evolve. And so, when we're looking at that movie, we're just, again, a smaller role in a much bigger epic adventure.
So let me ask you this. If you had a magic wand and it had one use, like disposable wand, you get to use it one time, what do you use the magic wand for?
Wow. I don't know if I'd want that power. Because it's not a one problem situation to fix.
I didn't say it was. I said, you know what? You come home one day and your wife's like, honey, look what I found. And I think you should use it. And do you just give it away?
No, I wouldn't give it away because I wouldn't trust anybody.
Then you got to use it.
Oh, man.
Don't dodge the question. You're going to answer it.
No, I'm not dodging it. That's a beautiful question. And it's a really hard one. Maybe that's when I have to start asking all my guests.
It's the Puri question. No.
I've done the opposite, where I've asked people about, if you could go back in time and change one thing, what would you change? Mm-hmm. And to me, that answer has always been nothing, because if I change anything in the past, it's going to have a rippling effect through lives of a multitude of people, because you've impacted so many different people. I mentioned Jay and how I used to pick on him and stuff. Mm-hmm. If I go back and say, I'm going to go back in time and I'm going to treat Jay nicely and I'm going to defend him anytime anybody picked on him, it's going to have an impact on changing it. It might be better, it might be for the worse, but there's a certain ripple effect that you can't account for. That's, that's a movie theme, that I'm sure
Having
has been
worked on
done.
a lot of time travel movies, they basically break down into there was a flaw in the past and you have to go there and fix it so today's better, or today's good and someone screwed up something in the past and you have to rush back and try and restore the past to what it was, right?
Yeah.
So it is very true what you're saying. Like there is that sense of it all ripples. So are you going to play God and determine how something changes? But you're just dancing around my question. Like,
well, it's like, what one thing can I change that is, I'm not stalling. It's a really tough question. And I think there's too much power in that to change just one thing. Because again, if I change that one thing, what impact is that having on other things?
You don't know. You don't know.
If I could wave that magic wand and, suddenly make, this podcast bigger than Joe Rogan's, which would be a reasonable thing to do with that magic wand.
There you go. That is one thing you can do.
Podcaster bigger than Joe Rogan. What comes with that? And what are the implications of being that big? I may suddenly no longer be I don't want to say as spiritual, but I might, you look at a lot of these powerful pastors out there. I won't mention any names of different ones, but
caught
some
up
of
in
these guys that are these
scandals
mega
that seem
churches,
to, yeah,
they end up, falling apart because they've grown so big.
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you worry about that for you? You're like, you know what? If we hit 1 million monthly downloads, I'm just gonna fall apart. He's so evil.
Yeah. That's a challenge. I want to take that on.
You're like, tempt me with that. Let me see what I can do.
We'll deal with that when we get there.
No,
but to wave a wand and to get that, because if I'm so blessed that I can have 1 million downloads a month from this podcast or my Aging Well podcast, I would feel like I've earned that, right? And because I'm doing the things that are going to bring it up. But if I waved a wand to get it, did I really earn it? And what's coming from it? It's like winning the lottery. How many people win these multi-million-dollar lotteries? Not that I wouldn't want to win the lottery, but they win the lottery and their life goes to crap because they don't know how to deal with it. They haven't kind of grown into that wealth. It's just something that suddenly they waved the wand and they got it. So honestly, I would feel like I would bury that wand in somewhere where people can find it, because I think there's just too much power to it. Well, what would you do?
I actually thought about this because I was talking about this with Laura the other day, and let us assume the rules are one and done. Anything is possible. No boundaries on this. And a lot of my thought is about the world that my kids are going to inherit. I'm going to be gone. I would use the wand to imbue everyone with a little more empathy. I think that's probably the best thing I could do so my kids have a better world.
Yeah, I guess that's, one thing that you can do that can do no damage. There can be absolutely
we don't know.
No
the best intentions sometimes don't, have the best outcomes, but it is something when I thought about it, I was like, I can stand behind that, and I have a hard time seeing that the risk factor on the downside is greater than the risk factor on the upside.
Right. Because I'm just thinking of different things. It's like, okay, I could wave the wand to be no racism. Well, yeah, that would be wonderful, but maybe not. Maybe there's someone out there who, in the face of racism, stands up and does something that just propels the world forward in far greater ways than if it wasn't there in the first place.
Oh, man. You know what?
This is a really deep question.
This is a very germane, topical thing to be talking about. And I appreciate your saying that because, yes, I do live in Texas now. And there is, on a regular basis, some confrontation with someone who holds beliefs that I find to be racist and reminds me of when I was little in Virginia, that there were certain places you just didn't go. And maybe in the face of that, there is something good that comes. Let's hope for that.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's where I'm kind of optimistic of that spiritual evolution.
Yeah, let's hope the global tectonic movements of these things create some great Mount Everest and, and the Grand Canyon.
Of course, then you're dealing with all the people who, in the kind of wake of that tension and that growth and that development, get harmed and maybe don't come out of it as well. It's
a tough one, man.
And if we talk spiritual and we talk about God. It's, whatever your perspective is on God, and then if you're not a believer in God, you're atheist, you're agnostic. Don't turn us off right now as I talk about this. It's just, let's say there's a hypothetical God, and God with a snap of his fingers created the universe, and I don't think we can deny that the universe started with like a big bang, whatever
current
physically or scientifically that entails. It's not as likely that it was a 7-day creation where he snapped his fingers and said this happens, and this is good.
Yes,
because even at that point, at the end of the 6 days of creation, and he rested on the 7th, it's in that period of rest that all the stuff that we're dealing with has evolved. So he didn't create a perfect world, or at least it wasn't as perfect as it was. There was still that, and again, that gets into the Adam and Eve story, that kind of fall in the garden. It's so I don't think that we can just snap our fingers and create a perfect world and everything is going to remain hunky-dory for eternity. So I think we need much of this, friction that we're calling a spiritual problem. We need it to evolve into a much higher species of man.
Man, I hope you're right. The good doctor has spoken. So. Yes.
But that is a profound question to ask. And I'm going to have to remember that one, and we'll call it the Puri question.
I will look forward to it on future episodes.
Maybe we ask that on every episode of this where I do interviews now.
If I hear someone answer better than I did, I'll be like, oh, I should have said that.
Well, I think that's going to always be the case. We're always going to end up saying, oh, yeah, I should have said that.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But, it's like the implications. I do think empathy at least can do the least amount of harm.
I'm with you. I have a hard time seeing that there's a lot of downside with that.
Right.
And I think that if nothing else, thinking that way reminds me of not being as reactive as I could be. I'm by no means like perfect in how I relate to other people, but sometimes you need a deep breath and just go, you know what, from whatever this person, experienced before the day I met them, this is where they are today. And they're on a trajectory, and who knows where it ends up, but just take a deep breath and be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to refer to black people the way you do, or Hispanic people the way you do. Like, that's not who I am. But I hear that that's where your upbringing brought you.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Okay. That was profound.
Yeah, it goes deep sometimes. Don't worry. I have a lot of light conversations. By the way, I love hot fudge sundaes. Walks in the park. Things like that.
That's not at all where I thought this conversation was going to go today.
Where did you think it was going to go?
Well, I was thinking we were going to talk about kind of work. And
happy to talk about. I'm passionate about my work. I love it's probably what I do right now is probably the most meaningful thing I have done in my life. Even though everyone wants to talk to me about the movies I've worked on, what I do now I think is way better.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the work that you did. We'll talk about the work that you are doing.
There we go.
But I feel like that's like it's. And maybe we end up splitting this into 2 episodes because, we kind of ended on a really profound note in that last conversation.
We could come back and do another episode another time. I'm super open. If you have an intention around that, I'm here to serve.